Evelyn Mae, at 74, knew the rhythm of the Appalachian mountains better than her own heartbeat. Her small, clapboard cabin, weathered to a soft, silvery gray by decades of sun and rain, nestled deep within a quiet fold of evergreen and ancient oak. It had been her sanctuary for over 30 years, ever since she'd traded the bustling city life and the familiar chaos of a high school history classroom for the crisp, clean scent of pine and the endless, soothing murmur of the wind through the vast, untamed woods. Here, time stretched out, measured not by the relentless tick of clocks or the hurried rush of schedules, but by the turning of seasons, the southward migration of birds across the vast expanse of autumn sky, and the slow, quiet, almost imperceptible growth of the forest around her. Her days were a tranquil symphony, filled with the simple, profound joys of a life lived intimately close to the earth, tending her medicinal herb garden, its raised beds neatly arranged behind the cabin, each plant a small green miracle, sketching the ever-changing light on the distant ridge, her charcoal-smudged hands a testament to hours spent in quiet observation, and listening to the ancient stories the wind whispered through the towering pines, tales as old and enduring as the mountains themselves. She treasured her solitude, valuing the deep quiet that allowed her thoughts to unfurl like ferns in spring, but it was a solitude rich with the vibrant, unseen presence of nature, a deep, silent communion with the wild world that surrounded her. This particular winter had been one of the harshest Evelyn had seen in decades. Snow had fallen relentlessly since early December, not in gentle, picturesque flurries that dusted the landscape, but in heavy, continuous blankets that buried the trails deep, turning familiar landmarks into soft, undulating mounds, and frosting the entire world in a pristine, unforgiving white. The temperatures plummeted to bitter, biting lows that stole the breath from her lungs, turning the cabin's windows into intricate ice tapestries that sparkled like a million diamonds in the meager sunlight, and making even short trips to the detached woodshed a bracing, almost painful adventure that left her muscles aching with the persistent cold. She was well prepared, of course, a lifetime in these mountains, plus her meticulous planner's mind from years of teaching, had instilled in her a deep sense of foresight. Her pantry was well stocked with home-canned goods and dried provisions, enough to last her through the longest freeze. Her firewood pile stacked high against the north wall, a fortress against the encroaching chill. But even her seasoned spirit felt the persistent, heavy weight of the endless cold, a thick, icy cloak that seemed to press down on the very air, muffling sounds and demanding a deep, internal fortitude. One frigid morning in late January, as the sun, a pale, anemic disk in the icy sky, struggled to cast any warmth through the crystalline air, Evelyn decided to brave the biting cold to check her squirrel feeders. She carried a small canvas bag of black oil sunflower seeds, their nutty aroma a small, comforting presence against the biting wind. She moved slowly, her old, sturdy insulated boots crunching through the brittle, crusty snow, leaving a deliberate trail of deep, dark depressions behind her. The air was so still, so utterly quiet, that her own breath plumed out in white clouds before her, hanging momentarily like fragile ghosts before dissipating into the vast stillness. As she rounded a familiar cluster of dense hemlocks, their branches heavy with snow that weighed them down like laden arms, her gaze drifted instinctively to a sheltered hollow beneath a massive, ancient oak tree. Its sprawling roots, gnarled and thick as a man's body, formed a natural alcove, a place she'd always suspected was a den site for smaller animals, perhaps elusive foxes or sleepy groundhogs, given the faint tracks she'd sometimes spotted there in warmer months. But today, something caught her eye. A dark, irregular shape, almost entirely obscured by a fresh drift of powdery snow. Her heart, usually as calm and unruffled as a frozen pond, gave a little jolt, a sudden, surprising flutter against her ribs. It wasn't a fox. It was a bear. And not just any bear. It was a sow, large and shaggy, curled impossibly tightly into a ball, her dark fur almost blending seamlessly with the shadows of the tree and the accumulating debris, partially buried in a mound of snow that had drifted around her like an unkempt duvet. Evelyn had seen bears before, of course, from a respectful distance. A fleeting flash of black fur across a distant ridge as she hiked, a quick glimpse of a broad back disappearing into the dense undergrowth on a summer afternoon, their presence a silent, powerful acknowledgement of the wildness of her home. But never this close, and never like this. There was a faint, almost imperceptible rise and fall of the snow on the bear's broad back, a subtle, rhythmic movement that signaled shallow, almost hibernating breathing. Then, her eyes widened further. Tucked impossibly deep within the sow's enormous, protective embrace, almost invisible against her dark fur, were three tiny, rust-colored cubs. They were little more than balls of fluffy fur, utterly vulnerable, miniature versions of their formidable mother, snuggled tightly against her warmth. One little head, no bigger than her fist, lifted slightly, its tiny nose twitching almost imperceptibly, before tucking back under the protective flank of its sleeping mother. Evelyn realized with a jolt that the bear had chosen this relatively exposed hollow rather than a deeper, warmer cave or rock crevice, perhaps due to the sudden, unexpected, and utterly brutal severity of the early winter. They were surviving, barely, an incredible feat of endurance, protected only by the mother's formidable body and a thin, fragile blanket of insulating snow. It was a testament to the raw, unyielding will to live that pulsed beneath the earth's frozen surface. Evelyn stood frozen for a long, quiet moment, the piercing cold of the January air forgotten, replaced by a deep chill of awe and profound concern. Her mind raced, sifting through years of nature documentaries, old forestry books passed down from her grandfather, and her own accumulated wisdom of the wild. Bears usually den in late autumn, well before the worst of winter sets in, and these cubs were clearly very young, unmistakably born midwinter in the depths of the den. They shouldn't be so exposed, so fragile against the relentless elements. She knew the dangers of interfering, the absolute necessity of non-intervention with wild animals, especially a mother with cubs. It was the cardinal rule of the wilderness, ingrained in her very being. Yet, the sight of their fragile vulnerability, the sheer, silent struggle for survival in such brutal conditions, stirred something deep within her, a profound maternal ache she hadn't known she possessed in years. It was a primal empathy that transcended the strict rules of human logic, speaking directly to her heart. She retreated, her movements slower and more silent than usual, her every step deliberate, careful not to disturb the fragile peace of the den. Each crunch of her boot on the snow sounded like a thunderclap in the profound stillness of the frosted woods. Back at her cabin, the warmth of the wood stove felt almost oppressive, a stark, almost guilty contrast to the desperate cold she had just witnessed. She couldn't shake the image of the little family battling the elements, an island of desperate life in a vast, silent sea of frozen white. Over the next few days, she found herself making deliberate detours during her wood-gathering trips, always keeping her distance, always observing from a hidden vantage point behind a dense screen of fir trees, her breath held, her gaze fixed on the quiet hollow. The sow barely moved, a statue of pure maternal devotion, her entire being focused on providing warmth and protection. The cubs were tiny, dependent blobs of life, occasionally stirring, their presence a silent, hopeful testament to the tenacity of nature. Evelyn, with a quiet deliberation that was her hallmark, started leaving small, careful offerings. Not directly by the den, that would be too risky and disruptive, potentially habituating them to human presence or, worse, drawing other predators to their vulnerable location. But a good 50 yards away, near the edge of the hollow, in a clearing visible from the den, she'd place a handful of dried apples from her cellar, their sweet, tart scent still lingering despite the cold, or a few handfuls of black oil sunflower seeds she usually reserved for the boisterous squirrels that frequented her feeders. It was a silent, almost ritualistic gesture, a quiet offering to the struggle of life, a communion without words. She never saw the bear take them, the sow was too cautious, too focused on her primary task, but the next morning, or sometimes by nightfall, the food would be gone, leaving only faint impressions in the snow. A silent acknowledgement. A fragile, unspoken pact between woman and wild. As weeks slowly thawed into late winter, the days gradually lengthened, stretching out by precious minutes, and the sun, though still cool, gained a little more strength, its rays beginning to melt the top layer of snow, making the forest glisten. The snow began to recede, reluctantly at first, revealing patches of frozen earth, then matted brown leaves, and finally, the first brave shoots of green. The bear family stirred more noticeably. Evelyn, watching from her cabin with her trusty old brass binoculars, felt a wave of relief as she saw the sow slowly, painfully, emerge from her snow den. She was gaunt, her ribs faintly visible beneath her shaggy fur, clearly weakened by the long winter and the immense demands of nursing her cubs. The 3 cubs, now a little larger, their movements more coordinated, their fur fluffier and less matted, tumbled around her, tiny, playful shadows against the stark, thawing landscape. They were still wobbly, prone to comical tumbles, but their play was unmistakable, their sheer joy in movement palpable. Evelyn watched their first tentative steps outside the hollow, the mother's watchful, vigilant gaze never leaving them, the cubs' clumsy explorations, their tiny noses twitching, eager to explore a world slowly coming back to vibrant life. It was a sight of such raw beauty and resilience that it brought fresh tears to her eyes, tears that traced warm paths down her weathered cheeks, mingling with the crisp air. She continued her quiet offerings, now placing handfuls of her precious dried huckleberries and even a bit of leftover oatmeal, fortified with molasses and a touch of rendered bacon fat, further away from the den. She varied the locations, always trying to provide sustenance without habituating them to her presence, always prioritizing their wildness, knowing that their true home was the forest, not her cabin. One crisp late winter afternoon, a surprisingly dramatic event unfolded. Evelyn was sketching the bare, elegant branches of a sycamore tree near her cabin, capturing the intricate patterns against the pale sky, when she heard a low, guttural growl, deeper and more menacing than the sow's, followed by a sharp, terrified yelp from one of the cubs. She grabbed her binoculars, her heart leaping into her throat, a cold dread washing over her. A young, large male bear, easily twice the size of the sow, had stumbled upon the family. He was assertive, perhaps looking for a mate as spring approached, or simply asserting dominance over the territory, a dangerous, unpredictable force. The sow, despite her still weakened state, roared, a guttural, terrifying sound that echoed through the quiet valley, placing her formidable body firmly between her precious cubs and the towering male. Her fur bristled, her stance defiant. It was a tense standoff, a primal drama unfolding before Evelyn's very eyes, a ballet of raw power and desperate maternal protection. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Just as the male seemed poised to advance, its head lowered, a deep growl rumbling in its chest, one of the cubs, bolder or perhaps simply more clumsy than its siblings, let out a tiny, high-pitched whimper and stumbled slightly, almost exposing itself. The male bear's head snapped to the sound, its attention momentarily diverted. The sow let out another, desperate, heart-wrenching roar, a sound that spoke of pure, unadulterated fear and maternal fury. It was a precarious moment, the balance of power teetering on a knife's edge. Then, from the dense underbrush near Elias Thorne's cabin, the old trapper from the next valley over, whom Evelyn knew only by reputation, a fellow solitary soul of the mountains, a sharp, piercing whistle cut through the air. Elias, she knew, rarely ventured this far from his own territory unless something was amiss. The male bear, startled by the unfamiliar, sharp, and very human sound in the otherwise quiet confrontation, hesitated, its large head swiveling towards the sound. It let out a frustrated huff, a puff of condensed breath in the cold air, then, perhaps sensing a larger human presence, turned and lumbered off into the deeper woods, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared, a dark shadow melting into the shadows of the ancient trees. The sow paused, breathing heavily, her massive chest heaving, then looked in the direction of Elias's cabin, her intelligent eyes seeming to hold a flicker of understanding, a momentary acknowledgement of the unseen intervention, before she gathered her 3 still trembling cubs and retreated deeper into her own territory, away from both threats. Evelyn, who had been holding her breath so long her lungs ached, her hands clasped tightly, slowly exhaled, a shaky sigh of profound relief. Elias, she knew, rarely ventured this far. It was an almost uncanny coincidence, a subtle, almost miraculous intervention that had perhaps saved the cubs, a testament to the unseen interconnectedness of the forest. As spring truly took hold, the last vestiges of snow vanished, melting into rushing rivulets that fed the awakening streams, revealing vibrant green shoots of new growth and a profusion of wildflowers that painted the forest floor in hues of purple, yellow, and white. The air filled with the buzzing of bees and the chirping of returning birds. Evelyn saw the bear family less and less, a good sign. They were moving, exploring, finding their own food sources, growing stronger, their wildness asserting itself with each passing day. She found herself missing their quiet presence, the daily ritual of her observations, the silent, profound connection she had forged. The hollow beneath the old oak was now empty, the only sign of its former occupants a few flattened patches of earth and perhaps the faint scent of musk. Then, one early summer morning, a gift appeared. Evelyn stepped out onto her porch, the air sweet with the heady scent of honeysuckle and the rich earth after a soft night rain, and saw it. On her weathered porch step, nestled carefully as if placed there by gentle, unseen hands, was a small cluster of ripe, plump huckleberries, dusted with morning dew, the kind that grew higher up on the mountain, far from her cabin. There was no one around, no human footprints, no disturbed moss. Just the berries. Evelyn picked them up, their tart sweetness bursting on her tongue, her heart swelling with an emotion too profound for words. It was a silent thank you, a reciprocal gesture from the wild, a whisper of connection from the forest itself, a moment of deep, profound reciprocity that she knew she would carry with her always. Evelyn continued her life, her days filled with the same gentle rhythms, but now infused with a new, quiet joy. She still sketched the changing light on the ridge, still tended her herbs, their leaves fragrant under her touch, still listened to the wind. But now, when the wind whispered through the pines, it carried a new secret, a story of unexpected kinship in the heart of the Appalachian wilderness, a bond forged not through words, but through silent understanding and shared resilience. She knew the bears were out there, somewhere, thriving, wild and free, living their lives as they were meant to. And she, the quiet woman of the mountains, felt a profound peace, knowing she had played a small, silent part in their journey, forever linked by a shared moment of kindness in the deep snow and the quiet, humble offering of berries. The solitude of her cabin no longer felt simply content, it felt connected, woven into the vast, living tapestry of the mountain's quiet, wild heart, a quiet sanctuary where her own spirit had found its most cherished home, bound by the unseen threads of the natural world. She sometimes found other small tokens, a perfectly preserved bird's feather, a smooth, curiously shaped stone, placed discreetly near her path. She never saw the giver, never sought them out, but each discovery was a quiet confirmation, a whispered reminder that she was seen, she was acknowledged, she was part of the intricate, ancient web of the forest. And in the depths of winter, when the snow once again blanketed her world in white, Evelyn would look out at the silent, sleeping hollow beneath the old oak, and a warm, knowing smile would touch her lips. The bears would be denayed, somewhere safe and warm, preparing for the spring. And she, in her cabin, would wait, listening to the whispers of the woods, a silent guardian of a truly wild secret.